Sameach, Hanukkah Sameach Lekulam to everybody. I think we'll pick up from where we left off last time. We were talking about the matter of priorities, prioritizing our learning of Torah and implementation of God's commandments. Basically, last time we spoke about how if somebody is just getting into learning Torah and keeping the mitzvot, keeping the commandments, that he shouldn't overwhelm himself or be overwhelmed by other people with doing all kinds of different commandments and laws, which may be real and valid laws, but which aren't necessarily what he should be focusing on at the beginning. That's because it's impossible for anyone just starting out to know everything all at once. Therefore, as we learn, we should choose to focus on those matters that are most important. So it's impossible to know what the reward is of all the different commandments, what reward is greater or that I would like more than another. But we do know that God gave the Torah to us for our goodness. As mentioned in a video I recently uploaded, this is said quite explicitly in the Torah that God gave His commandments to us for our good, and we also know that a large portion of the Torah is with regard to how man interacts with other people. We know that on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, that while if we repent, we're automatically forgiven of the transgressions we did between ourselves and God, in order to be forgiven for the transgressions between man and man, we need to seek the forgiveness of that individual as well. So in prioritizing the keeping of mitzvot, before a person delves into all the different opinions in the Talmud, if they're going to even do that, as to how you go about divorcing your wife, let's say, and giving her a divorce certificate of divorce in some outrageous situation that would almost never occur, before somebody delves into such unrealistic laws, he should first become familiar with how he deals with his fellow man. And even with regard to the commandments of serving God, the basics of those commandments before delving into the details. This is something that's emphasized in a book that I wanted to prepare something to say for to you guys about, the book Hovot Alavavot, the duties of the heart. I wanted to prepare something to say taken from this book, didn't really get a chance, but he emphasizes and focuses on this matter a lot, how sad it is, the situation in the Jewish world even at his time, and this is, let's see, maybe around the year 900 even, that people go into such detail about learning the super details of the Talmud when they haven't even focused on the basic duties of the heart. So I recommend everybody get this book if you can and read it in your spare time. I think the best thing to do, since I didn't have much time to prepare, is to pick up where we left off in the laws of prayer in the Mishneh Torah. We went about a little over halfway through the first chapter of the laws of prayer. I believe we got to approximately the, let's see, okay, I believe we got to the end of the fourth law of the first chapter. So let's pick up there. Is that alright with you guys? Let's hear some feedback. Yay, nay. Choose a different topic if you want. I'll give you 20 seconds. Okay. Anybody disagree? Alright. Okay. So we're starting at the fourth law. You can find Mishneh Torah translated on Chabad.org, CHABAD.org. Type in Mishneh Torah, and then in parentheses, Rambam. Rambam, and you should be able to find it there. Laws of Prayer, first chapter, fourth law. It says, Shlosh Rishonot Shevach Ladonai. The first three blessings of the daily prayer are praise to God. Shlosh Aharonot Hodaya. The last three blessings of the standing prayer of the Amida are blessings of thanksgiving to God. Wa Amsa'iyot, and the middle intermediate blessings of the standing prayer, יש בהן שאלות כל הדברים שהן כמו אבות לכל חפשי איש ואיש. So the middle blessings of the standing prayer contain requests of all the different general matters that are like headings or main categories that include all the basic desires of each and every man, and for every community. So this is the way that reciting the daily prayer of the Amida, of the standing prayer that we say, fulfills the Torah obligation to pray every day. Because as we covered last week, one fulfills his obligation to pray by fulfilling three components of prayer. Not just saying thank you God and that's it, but he also has to include two other aspects. Not only thanksgiving. There needs to be praise to God, request, and thanksgiving. And the Shemona Esrei, the Amida, contains all three of these. This they established in the Shemona Esrei so that the required order of prayer, praise, request, and thanksgiving, so that this order be established in the mouths of all, and so that they be able to learn it quickly. So that the prayer, even of those who are grammatically challenged, let's say, as we mentioned last week, the people of Israel at the time that the standing prayer was established, they were not able to express themselves in any one language, neither exclusively in Hebrew nor exclusively in a non-Hebrew language. So establishing this text for prayer gave them also the ability to express their praise, requests, and thanksgiving to God. So that they could feel their obligation of prayer just as one who possesses a pure tongue is able to express himself. And this is the essential reason that they established all of the blessings and the prayers in an orderly manner in the mouth of all of Israel. So that even the illiterate or the one who has bad grammar will be able to express his worship to God. Now this is very interesting. It seems that today, unfortunately, a large portion of the religious Jewish world seems to have lost sight of the reason for establishing Jewish prayer and the blessings. It's emphasizing over and over again that the essential reason was to give access to all the average person, all the regular people, to give them access to proper worship of God. And yet we see today that the situation is not exactly ideal. You go in and, well, I don't want to complain too much. So we're here to learn how it's supposed to be. Alright, so we're continuing. Now we're on the fifth law in the first chapter. And likewise, they established that the number of the prayers should be according to the number of the korbanot, the sacrifices. So the number of the prayers are parallel to the sacrifices in the temple. 2 prayers every day. 2. So 2 prayers every day, parallel to the 2 continual daily offerings that are to be offered in the temple. וכל יום שיש בו קורבן מוסף, תקנו בה תפילה שלישית, כנגד קורבן מוסף. And every day, any day that there's a Qurban Musaf, an additional sacrifice, essentially the holidays, the Torah holidays, not the rabbinic ones, and Rosh Chodesh, and the new moons, and on Shabbatot, and on the Sabbaths, they have additional sacrifices in addition to the regular daily offerings. So on those days, we likewise have an additional prayer, in addition to the two that the sages required us pray every day. And this additional prayer is called Musaf. Till this day, in all Jewish communities, this additional prayer is known as Musaf. That means added, from the word, like the word Joseph, Yosef. He shall add Yosef, like Yosef, he will add. So Musaf means added. Yosef, Musaf. See the connection? Good. No, don't fall asleep on me now. Hello? Continuing. وتفلا شكنرد تميز شلبقر هي هنقرأ تفلات الشاحر. So, the prayer which is parallel to the continual daily offering that is offered in the morning, this prayer is called Tefillat HaShahar. Tefillat HaShahar means the prayer of the Shahar, the prayer of the morning. That's why we call the morning prayer Shaharit, from the word Shahar, meaning morning, early morning. وتفلا شكنرد تميد شل بينه أربعين, and the prayer which is parallel to the daily offering, which is to be made among the evenings. This is called Hinikreth Tifilat Minha. It is called the Minha prayer. So Minha means an offering. Minha literally means like an offering or a present. Utafillah Shakanereth Hamusafin, and the prayer that is parallel to the additional offerings, Hinikreth Tifilat Hamusafin. It is called the Musafin prayers. And in regular speech, we say it in singular. Here it's Musafin because it's plural. But in singular form, it's Musaf, which means the additional prayer. Alright, moving on to the sixth law. If you guys have any questions, stop me. I'm glancing up every now and then to see if you've said anything. Just make sure you're alive. Okay, the sixth law. And likewise, they made rulings regarding that a man prays a prayer also at night, one prayer. And why did they make laws concerning when a man will pray a prayer at night? Because even though there was not an offering offered in the nighttime, you had the limbs that were left over from the animals that were offered during the day, from the minha offering. They were remaining over into the night and continued to be consumed in the fire into the night, as it is stated. Shanna Amar. This is the offering upon the firewood, upon the altar, all the night, until the morning. So this nighttime prayer that they instituted laws regarding when one will pray at night, it is for the case that a person will pray a prayer parallel to the continual burning of the limbs of the offerings that were offered earlier, those limbs that continue to burn throughout the night into the morning. In accordance with the matter that is stated, evening, morning, and afternoon. I shall give my conversation or communion with God, and I shall lift up my voice of moaning. This is from the book of Psalms, chapter 55, the 18th verse. There you see a biblical source for these three major prayers in the everyday. You see already that it was an early practice, even though it wasn't yet instituted in the time of King David, it was already a widespread practice. So that he stated, evening, morning, and afternoon, I shall commune with God and lift up my moaning. Amitai asked, will we need to start the blessing again when our minds started to wonder? If you're referring to the type of prayer that we're talking about here, the Amida, also known as the Shemona Esrei, this is the main central prayer that we pray every day. So as long as you had intention when you said the first of those blessings that constitute the Amida, so long as you had intention in that first blessing that you are standing in the presence of the Creator and you're humbling your heart before Him as a servant, then you need not go back and begin again. And the blessings that come after that, you should also have intention, but if you don't go back to the beginning of the whole prayer. You can, so long as you haven't finished any of those later blessings, so long as you haven't yet said Baruch Atah, blessed are you. If you haven't yet said that and you realize you didn't have intention, you can go back and say the beginning of that same later blessing of the prayer. But once you say Baruch Atah Hashem, you shouldn't stop. You should go forward and just try to have intention in the remainder. It helps to say your prayers in a relaxed pace, not rushed, but also not in such a frenzy, if you know what shuckling is, that it just becomes like a mantra and you don't even think what you're saying. Ideally, we should know everything that we're saying, think about everything that we're saying, and that we are saying it before the Creator. Alright, so we just read the book of Psalms, chapter 55, verse 18, the reference to the three prayers that the people of Israel were accustomed to pray at that time. Continuing in verse in the sixth law of the first chapter. And Tefillat Arvith, the nighttime prayer, is not a Huva. Huva, or Chova, means obligation. So here you have straight out, it's written that the nighttime prayer is not an obligation, it is not obligatory. Ki Tefillat Shaharith Minha, as is the morning prayer, Tefillat Shaharith, or Minha, the afternoon prayer. Wa'af'al Pichen, and even though, despite this, that the nighttime prayer is not obligatory, Naharu Kol Yisrael B'chol Maqamoth, the people of Israel in all locations are of the practice to say the nighttime prayer. B'chol Moshevotechem, B'chol Moshevotechem, in all of their, in all places and in all of their dwelling, in all of their residences. Litpalel Arvit, to pray the nighttime prayer. They're all accustomed to it, even though it's not obligatory. وَقِبَّلُوهَا عَلَيْهَن كِتْفِلَّاتْ حُوَّا, and they received upon themselves of their own, advising, to accept it upon themselves like an obligatory prayer. But it is important to distinguish between it and the truly obligatory prayers, for several reasons. I will go ahead and give some of those reasons. For one, this is the reason that we don't say the repetition in the nighttime prayer, because it's not obligatory. And therefore to say the repetition of the prayer for the nighttime prayer would constitute blessings said in vain. Why in vain? Because there is no obligation to say them. You could be doing it in order to teach someone, but that's different. The only reason we do the repetition in the other prayers is for the benefit of the community, though that there may be people who don't yet know the prayer, so that they can follow along when the prayer is repeated out loud. Unfortunately, none of this is taken seriously in modern times. If there is a synagogue that does take it seriously, I'm sure there may be a few, but they are certainly very special places. Okay, so now we've made it to the seventh law. And also, another prayer was instituted to be said after the afternoon prayer, after Tefillat Minha. This this extra prayer that they established is said samuch lishqi'at ha-hamma. It is said samuch, that means parallel to the setting of the sun, shqi'at ha-hamma, biyom ha-ta'anit bilvad. So this extra prayer, we now have 5 types of prayers here. We've mentioned the morning prayer, the afternoon prayer, which is called minha. We've mentioned the musaf prayer, the additional prayer that is said during the holidays, new moons, and the Sabbath. And we have the nighttime prayer, tefillat arvit, which is said at night that the people of Israel voluntarily accepted upon themselves. And now we have a 5th type of prayer, which is said parallel to the setting of the sun, and it is said biyom ha-ta'anith bilvad. Biyom ha-ta'anith means in the day of affliction, and this is just a Hebrew term referring to, it's generally understood as referring to, in its noun form, to fasting, because fasting is the affliction of the soul. So this 5th type of prayer is only said parallel to the setting of the sun on fast days, and as we will see, this is only biblically required at one time. Kedei lehosif tehina. So this extra prayer is added. Kedei meaning in order to. Lehosif, to add, just like the word musaf, turning into a Hebrew lesson here. Lehosif. So in order to add tehina uvaqasha, in order to add supplications and requests because of, or for the sake of, the fasting. Alright, continuing in the 7th law. So this 5th type of prayer is called Tefillat Ne'ilah. Kelomar, as it is stated, that is to say, that is to say, that the gates of the heavens have been nin'alu. So why is Tefillat Ne'ilah called Ne'ilah? Because the word Ne'ilah means a locking up, a shutting up, okay? And it's called Ne'ilah, the locking prayer, because it is as though to say that at this time the gates of heaven are being closed, all right, so to speak, because the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is coming to an end, and the gates of heaven are being closed with the sun's disappearance. Ba'ad shemesh wenistara. Alright, continuing. Lafi she'en mitpalalin ota Allah samuch lishqi'atha hama. So why another? So it's essentially called Ne'ilah because you only have up to that time that the sun is setting and then it disappears. After that, you are no longer able to pray this prayer on Yom Kippur once the sun has already set. Alright, now we are in the 8th law. Nimtsu'u hatafiloth b'chol yom sholosh. Sholosh means 3. So nimtsu'u hatafiloth b'chol yom. Thus we have 3 prayers every day, totaling 3. Here he's not saying you have to pray 3 specific prayers every day. He's saying this is the state that is found among the people of Israel. That there are 3 prayers you pray every day. It doesn't mean that we are only praying these 3 prayers every day. There are many prayers that Jewish people say every day. But these are the 3 prayers that are said at fixed times and within a fixed framework for the specific purpose of fulfilling the obligation from the Torah to fulfill prayer, done by, as we said, saying praise, requests, and thanksgiving. The other types of prayers that we say throughout the day, while they are prayers, they don't fulfill all 3 factors required to fulfill your Torah obligation. Everybody following? Woo! Alright. So those 3 prayers are Arvit, the nighttime prayer, with Shaharith, the morning prayer, Uminha, and the prayer of the offering prayer, which is the afternoon prayer. Alright, Uvashabbathoth Uvma'adim, and on Sabbaths and appointed times, that means the holidays, Uvrasheh Haloshim, and on new moons, Arba. So at these times, Sabbaths, appointed times, that is to say holidays, and the new moons, there are 4 prayers, 4 standing formal prayers. Shalosh Shalachol Yom, 3 prayers that we say on any given day, Utefilat Hammusofin, in addition to the additional prayer, Tefillat HaMusaf. Ubiyom Kippurim, and on the Day of Atonement, Hamesh, 5. So on the Day of Atonement, we have 5 prayers. Arba Elu, these 4 prayers that we mentioned before, and the additional prayer of the locking of the opportunity to make repentance on the Day of Atonement, which is called Tefillat Ne'ilah. So on Yom Kippur, we have 5 formal prayers. Nearing the end of the chapter. The 9th law, Tefillat Elu, these prayers, and Pohatin Mehen. So, with regard to these prayers, we are not to lessen from them. Okay? Aval Mosifin Aleihan. But you can add to them. If someone wanted to pray all the day long, theoretically, the permission is in his hand. He's allowed to. So you could say several prayers, not just 4 or 5 or 3. You could say several prayers all day long if you wanted to. The permission has been given over to you. And all of these prayers that he adds, it is like a voluntary offering, a generous offering, an offering of generosity. Therefore, so since it is like a voluntary offering, therefore the person needs to add something new in each of the 19 blessings that make up the Amida. He needs to add some kind of new some sort of new wording in each and every one of the middle blessings of the Amida. The addition needs to be with regard to the topic of each of these specific blessings. And if he innovated new wording, even in just one of those blessings of request in the Amida, that's sufficient. So he should, if you're saying a voluntary prayer, you should add some wording of your own in each of the blessings that appear in the middle of the Amida. But if you only added to one of those blessings, it's sufficient for a voluntary prayer. This is in order to proclaim that this is a voluntary prayer and not an obligatory prayer. All right. I suspect, this is just my suspicion here, since the Rambam already said quite explicitly that the nighttime prayer is not technically an obligation, but the people of Israel have accepted upon themselves like an obligation, that it may be worthwhile to say, at least in one of the middle blessings, something in your own words along the lines of the topic of that particular blessing, anytime you pray the nighttime prayer, because it's not an obligatory prayer. Minadin. Alright, so Shalosh Rishonot v'Shalosh Aharonot, the first 3 blessings of the Amida and the last 3 blessings of the Amida should never be added to. They should never be added to, and they should never be taken away from. We should never add words or content to the first and last blessings, nor should we remove from the words of the content of the first and last 3 blessings of the Amida. And nothing about them should be changed. If you're familiar with the prayers said leading up to Yom Kippurim, the Day of Atonement, you will know that the Jewish people around the world are of the custom to make a lot of additions to these 3 blessings, and it very much elongates the size of the Shemona Esrei, the size of the Amidah. Here we're reading that technically we're not supposed to add to or remove from or change anything in the first 3 blessings of the Amidah nor the last 3. So that's problematic. And I recommend praying, focusing on what is the minimum obligation, because if you pray more than the minimum obligation, you're not really going to be praying. if you go to just about any synagogue and you pray at a normal pace, the Amida and say Tahanun, Kriyat Shema, whatever, if you do it at a normal pace, almost everybody else is going to be finishing up before you've even finished. And they're finishing up even though they're finishing before you, even though they've added several things to what you're technically required to say. There's no way that you can say all those prayers with any amount of intention at the speed that is generally done. So I recommend not strictly following any one specific sidur that I'm aware of, but marking in your sidur those parts of the prayer that we're actually technically required to be doing, to be saying, and focus on praying those prayers with intention, rather than trying to cram everything stuffed into the pages of the sidur, trying to say them all with little to no intention. I recommend the version of prayer that's contained in the Mishneh Torah. The Rambam includes a text for the prayers in the Mishneh Torah. And I also recommend any other older version of Jewish prayers, such as the Rav Saadia Gaon's. Rav Saadia Gaon also has a sidur, one of the most ancient sidurim that are preserved, that we still have today. There are many similarities between Rav Saadia Gaon's and the Rambam's versions of the prayers, but there are some differences. Either of those I would recommend over any of the popular things today, because there have clearly been made several additions to Jewish prayer, not only outside the obligatory prayers that we have to say, but there have also been tons of additions made to the content of the prayers that we are obligated to say. I can tell you guys right now, as somebody who lived in Israel for 8 years and prayed, I don't know how, tons of times, essentially every day in Israel, and as somebody who's not fluent on a mother tongue level, but fairly fluent in Hebrew, that even as somebody who speaks Hebrew with some degree of fluency, there is absolutely no way that the average American, even Israeli who speaks Hebrew as a native speaker, there's no way that they can be praying with any level of intention, as should be, to the degree of speed that they're praying. Perhaps they're having intention in the first blessing of the Amida. So then they fulfill their obligation, technically. But that's what's called b'di'evid. That's called after the fact. It's okay. You don't have to go back and pray the prayer again, as long as you had intention in the first prayer. But that's not what we're supposed to be doing. We should have intention in every blessing, at least as many of the blessings as we're able to. And there seems to be absolutely no they're thinking of the Cholent afterwards. God bless them. I'll be thinking, never mind. Alright, so we have, let's see, I believe we have only one more law here. This is the 10th law of the first chapter. A congregation, acting as a congregation, when they're all together, alright, praying together, they're not to pray tefillat nadava. So, a voluntary prayer should not be said with a whole Jewish community saying it together. Because the community doesn't bring a voluntary offering. So the community only prays those prayers which are parallel to community offerings, such as the offerings that the daily required prayers are parallel to. The two daily obligatory prayers, they're parallel to the two daily obligatory offerings that are made in the temple, as well as to the continual burning of the afternoon offering that continues to burn throughout the night. Alright, but not so a voluntary blessing. It should not be said with the congregation in a communal sense. And even an individual praying alone shouldn't pray two prayers of the additional prayer, which is parallel to the additional sacrifice of the holidays, Sabbath, or the new moons. he shouldn't do so even if he prays one as obligatory and one as voluntary. Since there is no such thing as a voluntary additional sacrifice made on those days. وَيَشْ مِنَ گَؤَنِيم, and there are among the Geonim. Everybody here know who the Geonim are? Hello? Everybody knows who the Geonim are. So the Geonim are the leaders of the Jewish people who followed the era of the Talmud, who were the heads of the ancient yeshivot, the ancient schools of Jewish law that existed predominantly in the area of modern-day Iraq at that time. They continued the Talmudic tradition, explaining questions that people had regarding the intention of the Talmudic text and so forth. They were heads of that academy, of those academies, and a certain level of authority were given to them. Yeah, after Hazar, correct. And a certain level of authority was given to them by the non-Jewish authorities. Alright. Each one would be appointed by his predecessor as well. Alright, so this chapter is finishing up saying that there are among the Geonim those who instruct that it is forbidden to pray an additional prayer on Sabbaths and holidays, since no voluntary offerings are made on those days. Instead, one should only pray the obligatory blessings on the obligatory prayers on those days. Alright? I'm going to continue into the next chapter, chapter 2 of the Laws of Prayer, because it leads up to something that I think is pretty important. Shalom Din. So we are now starting chapter 2 of the Laws of Prayer in the Mishneh Torah. Here we're going to get to the short version of the Amida, which is good for everybody to know. It's good for people to know who are just beginning to pray and for who it may be difficult to take on a whole lot all at once. So it's a shorter version of the Amida, of the daily prayer. And it's also good for people who are already used to praying the regular Amida, but who may be in certain situations under stress or pressed for time, and this enables them to deal with a situation better while fulfilling their obligation. So chapter 2, you cannot find what, Amital? What are you not able to find? I'm not able to move back. Alright, so chapter 2. Bimei Rabban Gamliel Rabbu Haminim B'Yisrael. In the days of Rabban Gamliel, the heretics multiplied and increased among the people of Israel. Amital, I will post it to my Facebook right after this, alright? But just take note, right now, it's in the second chapter of the Mishnah, of the Laws of Prayer. So in the second chapter of the Laws of Prayer in the Mishneh Torah, it is the third law of the second chapter. Alright, so in the days of Rabban Gamliel, that's one of the leaders of ancient Israel, one of the leaders of the Mosaic court in ancient times. In his days, the heretics among the people of Israel increased. So these heretics, they were causing distress among the people of Israel, and were turning them away. This is the same term used for like turning away to false gods. They were turning them away from following after the Almighty. Oh, well, I don't think this short version of the prayer is found in most Sidurim. So it's just another example of how tons of unnecessary things are put into Sidurim, while very basic things are left out. You can find the short version of the Shemona Esrei, short version of the Amida, and the Sidur of Rav Kafeh. I'll write that for you. His version is called Siyah Yerushalayim. You can order that if you want. This is one of the main Baladi Yemenite Sidurim. It has a lot of additions as well, but the version of the prayers is nearly exactly the same as the version that the Rambam has in the Mishnah Torah. So I'm typing this for you. The seat of Rabbi Yosef Hapach. Called Siyah Yerushalayim. You can order it online. Okay. So the heretics were increasing. They were leading the people of Israel astray in the days of Rabban Gamliel. And when Rabban Gamliel, the leader of that generation, saw that this matter was a greater issue, greater than all the other matters that people were dealing with at that time, he arose together with his Beit Din, with his court, the great Sanhedrin of his time. They arose and they established a prayer, one blessing that should contain a request from before God that He will cause the heretics to disappear. Now, it's important to know, and you will constantly see it in the Mishneh Torah and in the Gemara and in the Talmud, that in these long lists where it talks about major changes that happen among the people of Israel, it will list the leader, and the leader doesn't mean the leader by himself did something. It means under his lead, the Sanhedrin, the great court of his generation, under his lead, instituted a certain practice. And so you will find many times that it will say his name, and then it will say, and his Beit Din. What it means by his Beit Din, his court, is not that he was running the court like the head honcho. He presided over the court, but he wasn't the only guy, and he alone did not have say. It still went according to majority ruling. It's just that he was the presider to keep order and such. So here it says that Rabban Gamliel and his court, they instituted this blessing, an additional blessing of request for the disappearance of the heretics. And they established it in the prayer of the Amida. So they put it into the prayer of the Shemona Esrei, of the Amida. They put it in the Amida, this blessing for the disappearance of the heretics, so that it would go into the mouths of all the people. And thus we find that the prayer, the amount of blessings in the prayer, totals 19. So it's no longer 18. The original was 18 blessings, but now it totals 19. So although we still refer to this formal prayer as the Shemona Esrei, it's now no longer technically Shemona Esrei, which means 18, but it is now Tisha Esrei, 19. The second law of the second chapter. In each of the prayers of these three prayers, that are said every day, so this prayer that's said every day, a person is to pray these 19 blessings of that prayer in the correct order. So with what does this regard? Alright, so with what does this regard? That a person every day when he says the three prayers he should say these 19 blessings? This is only this is only when he finds his mind focused, and only when his tongue is quick to read, only when he's able to have intention, and only when he's able to read fluently, or to recite fluently. The word to read and recite are the same in Hebrew. So the 19 blessings that we say every day, this is not required for each and every person, especially not people who are just beginning to keep Torah, as it says here. Alright? It's only for when a person's mind is settled and his tongue is able to recite. But إِمْ هِيَا طُرُوذ وَضُحُقْ أَشَقَّ الصَّرَى لِشَنَا. But when he was distracted or pressured, or his language or his tongue was restricted and disabilitated, in those cases, mitpaler shalosh rishonot. In those cases, he says the first three blessings of the regular prayer, which are the blessings of praise, uvracha ahath, and then one blessing, as opposed to all the regular intermediate blessings. He says one blessing after the first three, and in this one blessing, he has a semblance of all the regular intermediate blessings. And then after he says that one blessing that summarizes all the middle blessings of the regular 19 blessing prayer, he then says the three final blessings, which are blessings of thanksgiving. And in doing so, in doing so, he fulfilled his obligation. The third law was, and this is the blessing that was established after the semblance of all the intermediate blessings of the regular Amida. This one blessing that follows. This is to be said, this is the summary version that is to be said when one is restricted verbally or without enough intention. Cutting it? Finishing? Yeah? Continue? No? Oh, alright. So you say the three regular blessings of the Amida, and then after that you say this one blessing which begins Havinenu Adonai Eloheinu L'da'at Rochacha. Grant us understanding, O Lord our God, to know your ways. And circumcise our hearts to fear you. May forgiveness be to us, that we may be redeemed. Distance us from pain, and cause us to flourish and to dwell in the oasis of your land. And the dispersed of the four corners may you gather. And may those who are straying from your, or straying according to your knowledge, may you judge. And may you lift up your hand against the wicked. And may the righteous rejoice in the building of your city, and in the reparation, the fixing or restoring of your temple, and in the sprouting of the pride or horn of David your servant, and in the establishing of the lamp of the son of Jesse, your Messiah, your anointed one. Before we've called, you answer. Before we even speak, you have heard. For you are he who answers at every moment of distress. He who redeems and delivers from every distress, from every oppression. Blessed are you, O Lord, who hears prayer. So this was a summary of all of the intermediate prayers, and this should be said by anybody who is not yet fluent in the full 19 blessing long prayer of the Amida. Whether you're going to say it in English, Hebrew, or any other language, if you don't have time, if you're pressured, or you're not used to reading it, say this middle blessing in place of all the regular. Can you discuss the hygiene cleanliness one should have before prayer? So I'm reading to you guys from the Mishneh Torah, from the Rambam. So there are definitely probably other opinions, but this is a trustworthy opinion, even if you choose not to go by it. So you can find those laws. I'm not going to read them all, because we should probably be wrapping up. How much time should I? As much as I want. You find these laws in the fourth chapter of the laws of prayer. So actually that's not so far away. Just skip to the 4th chapter. Alright? It says in the first law of the 4th chapter, there are 5 matters that hold back one from praying. This means that when it says ma'akavim, that it holds back one from praying, it doesn't mean that you're not able to pray to God from your heart and that He won't hear you. Obviously, you can pray to God from your heart at any time, in any situation, if you're turning to Him with sincerity. But in order to fulfill this specific obligation from the Torah of praise, request, and thanksgiving, then one needs to take care of these following 5 things. And if he didn't take care of them, he's supposed to say the prayer over again, having taken care of the 5 matters. So those 5 matters are, even if the time has arrived, you need to take care of them. Those 5 matters are the purity of one's hands, the covering of nakedness, the purity of the place of prayer, and taking care of matters which may distract the person, and the intention of one's heart. So here you see the importance of the intention of your heart. If you didn't have intention, it wasn't prayer, you're just saying words. So it begins the 2nd law regarding the purity of hands. Purity of the hands, what is implied? So one rinses, washes his hands in water until the joint. The joint, ha-peret, refers to the wrist. Here. And afterwards he prays. So if a person was going on his way and the time for prayer arrived, and he didn't have water available, if between he and the water there was no more than 4 milim. Milim is 1 mil is a little bit less than a mile. Let's see if they have the exact amount. It's a certain measurement. Alright, so it goes on. If I would just continue reading, I would know. Shehem Shemonat Alafim Amma. So 4 milim is 8,000 amot. Amot is a cubit. It's like from your wrist to your hands to your elbow. So figure it up. It's roughly like 3 or so miles. If that's the distance, less than that you have to water, then you're to go get water if you're able to, if you have time, and then pray. So it says, so in that case, you go to the place of water, you wash, and then you pray. But if there was between he and the water more than this amount, then he merely wipes his hands with pebbles or with ash or with wood or anything of the sort, and he prays. Alright. So the 3rd law continues elaborating on it. What are you laughing at? The 3rd law continues. Under what circumstances do those laws pertain? When the water is in front of him, ahead of him, alright? But if the water is behind him, yeah, if the water was behind him, he's not obligated to go back that distance to get the water. It's only if in any case he'd be getting to the place. What was the joke? I don't remember. So if he passed up the water more than 1 mil, more than a kilometer or so, he doesn't need to go back to get the water. Rather, he simply wipes his hands and he prays. But with what does this regard? So in what situation does a person only purify for tefillah, for prayer? Only his hands. So the only required washing of hands when one is only required to wash one's hands, that's the case with all of the prayers except for the morning prayer. But with the morning prayer, so with the morning prayer, he's to wash his face, his hands, and his feet. And afterwards he's to pray. So if he was far from the water in the morning prayer, he only needs to wipe his hands alone. That's all he needs to do, and then he prays. Don't need to be wiping your face with dirt or sand or whatever, nor your feet, just your hands. So I think that's enough for now. Any questions? Hello. Good morning. Everybody awake. Over and out. So next week, do you guys want to continue with the laws of prayer, or do you have any ideas? If not, then I'm sure I can come up with something. All right. Would you guys prefer that I try to only directly translate to English, or that I continue like reading Hebrew and also English? Could be confusing. All right. So happy Hanukkah, Everett. Happy Hanukkah and Laila Tov.